Ocean mysteries are as fascinating as they are dangerous. Attractive beauty frequently conceals hidden dangers in a world teeming with life beneath its glittering exterior. Even though they are uncommon, attacks on marine life are sharp reminders of the precarious equilibrium between people and the natural world. From a shark's cunning ambush to a jellyfish's poisonous sting, these experiences demonstrate the unadulterated power of nature. Comprehending these occurrences promotes understanding and reverence for the animals coexisting in Earth's most mysterious habitat. Here are 6 stories. São Miguel is a volcanic island in the Atlantic known for its rocky coastlines and immaculate beaches. Even the most seasoned residents were speechless by a strange and terrible accident that shattered the island's peaceful reputation on October 18, 2024. Praia dos Moinhos was a beach on the northeastern coast of São Miguel, and the waters off it were surprisingly calm that morning. The ocean was glassy and inviting after the autumn winds, frequently bringing churning waves and stormy skies. In this tranquil environment, 32-year-old Russian surfer Irina Ivanova, an experienced wave rider traversing the Azores, paddled out for what she probably thought would be a routine surf session. But what awaited her was a clash between the harshness of nature and sheer impossibility. For a month, Irina had been in the Azores tracking waves and sharing her adventures on social media for a small fan base. She was born and raised in the seaside city of Vladivostok in eastern Russia, where the Sea of Japan's frigid waters surrounded her. For her, surfing was a way of life and a means of escaping the oppressive routine of her previous job as an accountant. It was more than just a sport. Having negotiated perilous breaks in Bali, the Gold Coast, and even the icy waters of Iceland, she was no stranger to peril. However, despite her years of experience, nothing had prepared her for what would happen on that fateful day. Irina paddled about 100 meters off the coast one morning past the breakers. She could see the marine life below unobstructed because the water was exceptionally clear. Under her board, schools of mackerel swam in unison, their silver bodies gleaming in the sunlight like tiny mirrors. A few fishing boats with crews carrying nets full of fish caught her attention in the distance about a kilometer offshore. Despite being normal for the region, the activity would unintentionally pave the way for the eventual disaster. Irina had no idea that the noise from the fishing boats had agitated a big swordfish, a creature notorious for its strength, speed, and unpredictable nature. At up to 14 feet in length and more than 1,000 pounds in weight, swordfish are apex predators that can reach 60 miles per hour. The long, sharp bill that bore their name was mainly used to slash and stun prey, but it could turn into a lethal weapon when the animal felt cornered or threatened. This specific swordfish, thought to be more than 10 feet long, probably panicked because it was confused by the fishing activity. The swordfish abruptly broke the surface around 30 meters away as Irina sat straddling her board, looking out over the horizon for a promising set of waves. A group of surfers nearer the coast, including a German visitor named Elke Fischer and a local named Gustavo Tavares, called the scene surreal. In a ferocious arc, the fish shot into the air, its enormous body contorting as if trying desperately to escape an invisible predator. When Irina heard the splash of the fish returning to the waters, she turned, still not realizing that the predator was near. The following events were nearly too quick for the human eye to comprehend. The swordfish charged straight at Irina. With a spear-like aim, it jumped out of the water with amazing speed. Irina barely had time to notice the movement before the fish's bill fatally struck her abdomen, impaling her just below the ribs. Her board was knocked off and she floated face up in the water, clutching the wound in shock. Unable to believe what they had just seen, the other surfers froze. Irina's closest friend, Gustavo, later told reporters that her scream made everyone react. While others on the beach frantically waved for assistance, he and Elke paddled in her direction. When Gustavo arrived, Irina's open wound was being stung by the salt water, which had turned red around her. Both its victim and the mayhem it had caused were all that remained of the swordfish after it vanished as swiftly as it had appeared. Irina's breathing was shallow and she was pale but conscious. Both seasoned surfers, Gustavo and Elke, stabilized her with their boards and rowed her back to land. Since the fish bill had pierced Irina's liver and intestines, Among other internal organs, every movement was excruciating. A small group had assembled when they arrived at the beach, their faces displaying a mixture of shock and disbelief. A local lifeguard, João Mendes, realized Irina's serious condition and promptly called for an air ambulance. It seemed like an eternity for those on the beach, but the helicopter arrived in 20 minutes. One of the largest hospitals on the island in Ponta Delgada received Irina after she was airlifted there on a stretcher. A group of doctors under the direction of Dr. Mariana Coutinho put forth a lot of effort to save Irina. The Swordfish bill had barely missed her heart but had caused severe internal bleeding, resulting in extensive damage. The medical team worked for 8 hours to remove pieces of bone and cartilage from the wound and repair the ripped organs. Despite everything, Irina made it through the ordeal. News of the incident spread swiftly, and the strange and almost deadly encounter was featured in headlines all over the world. In their comments, marine biologists emphasized that swordfish were not known to attack people and described the attack as incredibly rare. It was hypothesized by some that environmental stressors like habitat disruption and overfishing were the cause of the fish's aggressive behavior. Irina had a difficult and drawn-out recuperation. She underwent several surgeries to treat the complications from the initial wound while she was in the hospital for more than a month. She received support from friends and family who traveled from Russia, and the local surfing community came together to support her by holding fundraising events to pay for her medical bills. Even though she had experienced trauma, Irina remained resilient. In a statement made public months later, she thanked the strangers for saving her life and promised to go back to the ocean, although she acknowledged she might remain in calmer waters for the time being. The event became a local legend among the people of São Miguel, serving as a terrifying reminder of nature's unpredictable nature. Often joking that they had never anticipated encountering a swordfish while surfing, Gustavo and Elka were praised as heroes. Irina, however, did not find the experience amusing. It was a sobering reminder of both the untamed, unadulterated power of nature and the frailty of life. But even as she started to feel better and make cautious progress, she was adamant about regaining her love of surfing. She still felt most alive in the ocean, even though it had given her life meaning and almost taken it away. Lucas Reed, an experienced kayaker who enjoyed venturing into remote water, embarked on what he hoped would be a peaceful solo trip around the Farallon Islands on a clear, cloudless morning in 2024. The Farallon Islands were renowned for their rocky terrain and dramatic cliffs, and the waters surrounding them were teeming with marine life. Although the region was well known for being a great white shark hotspot, Lucas was drawn to the area because of its wealth of wildlife. Being an experienced explorer, he was confident in his ability to safely navigate shark habitats after kayaking there. There was a legendary past for the Farallons themselves. Known as the Islands of the Dead by early seafarers, the rocky formations had long captivated and frightened people. The islands were first used for egg harvesting in the 19th century before becoming a wildlife refuge. Despite the harsh and frigid waters around them, Lucas and other thrill seekers, photographers, and marine researchers were drawn to them because of their remote location. Lucas set up his gear on the deck of his rented charter boat, the Horizon's Edge, as golden sunlight spilled over the Pacific. Orrin Vance, a grizzled sailor with a weathered face from decades at sea, captained the boat. Lucas's bright orange fiberglass kayak was lowered into the water with a waterproof GPS and emergency signal device in place. He gave Orrin a final nod before paddling toward the southern edge of the islands, where elephant seals roared from the rocky shores and seabirds circled above. There were only sporadic swells to disturb the tranquil expanse of mirror-like water. Lucas paddled slowly, enjoying the island's bare beauty, the salty air's acrid smell, and the far-off sound of waves crashing against rocks. About an hour into his paddle, Lucas noticed an unsettling silence. The seals, once so noisy, were gone, and the seabirds' clamor had faded. The water, teeming with life, now felt unnervingly still. Only the steady splash of his paddle breaking the surface could be heard. He let his kayak drift momentarily, staring out over the horizon. There were no obvious signs of danger, but the tense quiet gnawed at the back of his mind. He became aware of the shadow at that moment. It was faint at first, a dark, blurry figure moving beneath him just barely discernible through the water's sun-dappled surface. Lucas's paddle was hanging in midair as he froze. Before disappearing into the depths, the shadow circled beneath his kayak with an eerie grace. Despite his best efforts to convince himself that it was simply a big fish, possibly a sea lion, his intuition told him otherwise. His heart raced as he started paddling again more quickly, trying to escape whatever was hiding below. The assault did not occur suddenly. Then suddenly, Lucas's kayak was clamped down by a huge, great white shark that broke the surface in a sudden burst of movement and water. The kayak flipped violently as the shark thrashed, and the force of the impact sent Lucas tumbling into the icy water. He surfaced a few feet away, gasping for air and disoriented, his hands scrambling for something to grab. He felt the chill like a blow to his chest and gasped as the icy water drained his energy. The shark, estimated to be over 15 feet long, released the kayak and swam off, its dorsal fin cutting through the water with chilling precision. Lucas's capsized kayak bobbed a few feet away, its bright orange hull now scarred with deep shark teeth gouges. Heart racing, he struggled to reach the emergency signal device clipped to his vest. Despite having cold, stiff fingers, he was able to press the activation button and send a distress signal to nearby vessels. Lucas was treading water for what seemed like hours, and as the shark circled closer, his gaze was fixed on its dorsal fin. He kicked his legs wildly to make himself appear bigger, a survival tactic he had read about but never thought he'd have to employ. Perhaps perplexed or uninterested, the shark briefly swerved away, allowing Lucas to swim in that direction of his. He clung to the hull while searching the horizon for assistance. Orrin Vance, who was back on the horizon's edge, had gotten the emergency signal and acted immediately. Orrin had navigated these waters for decades, so he was all too familiar with the risks. He radioed other nearby vessels for help as he cranked the engine and headed directly to where Lucas was. In response, a second vessel, the Blue Mariner, led by marine photographer Nadia Kessler, altered its course to offer assistance. The shark returned and tested the kayak by bumping it with its muzzle. Lucas kicked at the water with a tense grip while screaming defiantly and panicked. The shark seemed hesitant, perhaps unsettled by Lucas's commotion or the odd taste of fiberglass. Before disappearing into the depths, it made one final circle. Moments later, the roar of an engine broke the silence. Orrin's vessel appeared, followed closely by the Blue Mariner. Orrin tossed Lucas a rescue line and they maneuvered the horizon's edge closer. Lucas, exhausted and trembling from the cold, managed to grab hold and was dragged onto the deck. A short time later, Nadia arrived and took photos of the damaged kayak as it was hauled aboard, capturing the deep tooth marks left by the shark. Once safely on deck, Lucas collapsed, gasping for air. He was surrounded by blankets as Orrin navigated the boat back toward the mainland. Lucas had only suffered a few minor wounds from the fall into the water, including some scrapes and bruises. The kayak absorbed most of the force, with the shark's powerful jaws tearing through its side. In the days that followed, the incident was analyzed by shark specialists and marine biologists. Dr. Elias Mercer, a shark behavior expert, concluded that the attack was likely a case of mistaken identity. Seals were common prey for great white sharks, and from below, Lucas's kayak might have resembled a seal. He clarified that although human attacks were uncommon, they were not unheard of because the Farallon Islands were a natural hunting ground for these apex predators. Lucas found the experience to be both frightening and humbling. The experience gave him a fresh understanding of its unpredictable nature. Even though he was shaken, he promised to return to the water someday with more caution. The incident served as a sobering reminder of how delicately humans and nature coexist. The Farallon Islands became a place of wonder with their untamed splendor and abundant marine life. They were also a place where the fundamental laws of the ocean determined one's ability to survive. By the summer of 2002, the great white shark population on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, had started to recover. Tourists were drawn to Truro's long, sandy beaches by the unspoiled beauty of the Atlantic coast. Families swarmed to the beaches, some lounged under striped umbrellas, and kids ran in and out of the waves. The sun was high that morning, the air was warm, and the water glistened in its golden rays. no one could predict the tragedy that would occur a few hours later. In the quaint town of Truro, the beaches were famed for their tranquility, though they had a growing reputation as a feeding ground for great whites. Thanks to federal wildlife protections, the seal population on Cape Cod had flourished in recent years. Their numbers had grown so large that predators, including sharks, had come to rely on them as a food source. While shark sightings had increased, attacks on humans remained rare. Along the shoreline, signs warned swimmers to be shark smart, but these were often ignored, especially by tourists who tended to dismiss the risk as exaggerated. One of the guests that day was 34-year-old Olivia Martinez, a photographer from Albuquerque, New Mexico. A week earlier, she had traveled to Truro in search of a short break from her demanding work life. Although Olivia wasn't a very good swimmer, she loved the ocean and spent most mornings wading waist-deep to capture the horizon on camera. She went alone, renting a modest cottage a few miles inland, and she soon discovered the allure of Cape Cod. Olivia had joined a small group of beachgoers at Ballston Beach the morning of the attack. It was the ideal day for swimming because of the low tide and unusually calm water. At their nearby tower, lifeguards worked in shift rotation, keeping an eye on the swimmers who were scattered along the shore. Olivia went into the water at mid-morning wearing a one-piece light blue swimsuit. She brought only her waterproof camera, no snorkel or other equipment. Eager to take pictures of the horizon unhindered by beachgoers, she swam farther out than usual. She was unaware that a deep channel commonly used by seals to move between feeding grounds was located just beyond the sandbar. From the lifeguard tower, Olivia looked like any other swimmer, her arms gently splashing as she moved through the water. Toward midday, a shadow emerged beneath the surface. A great white shark, estimated to be over 12 feet long, had been cruising the area. Experts believed Olivia's movements and light-colored swimsuit might have resembled the seals. Driven by instinct, the shark closed in. The attack happened in an instant. Later, beachgoers reported seeing Olivia suddenly lurch downward, her body briefly disappearing beneath the surface. With tremendous force, the shark struck, its powerful jaws gripping her left leg and torso. As Olivia fought to break free, blood began to stain the water. While some visitors ran to the lifeguard tower to alert authorities, others screamed for help. Lifeguards, including 27-year-old Ryan Laskowski, rushed toward the water with rescue boards. But by the time they reached Olivia, the shark had already vanished into the depths. Olivia floated motionless, face down. Ryan and Emma Calloway, a 19-year-old lifeguard, dragged Olivia onto the rescue board and began paddling her back to shore. A small group of people had gathered on the beach, their faces pale with disbelief. Margaret Rutledge, a retired nurse, offered to help as the lifeguards began performing CPR. Olivia's injuries were severe, including deep cuts to her abdomen and a severed femoral artery. They did everything they could, but she didn't respond. Paramedics arrived minutes later, but it was already too late. Olivia Martinez was declared deceased upon arrival. The community was deeply shaken by the aftermath of the attack. The Atlantic White Shark Conservancy sent marine biologists to conduct an investigation after local authorities roped off the beach. Expert on sharks, Dr. Leopold Granger, told reporters that great white sharks frequently confused people for seals, especially in places where there were a lot of prey. He stressed that although they were tragic, these attacks were extremely uncommon. Dr. Granger told investigators that while sharks typically do not target humans, misidentification is often the cause of bites. Unfortunately, in Olivia's case, the result was fatal. Her death reignited discussions about beach safety and the growing number of great white sharks along the Cape Cod coastline. Local residents, including fisherman Edric Mullane, expressed concern over the rising seal population, believing it directly contributed to the increase in shark activity. Others, like conservationist Helen Varnum, urged people to respect the natural ecosystem and be more cautious in the ocean. The following evening, Olivia was honored with a candlelight vigil in town. Locals and visitors gathered on the beach with their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candles. Olivia's family, who had flown in from New Mexico, stood quietly by the water's edge, mourning the loss of their lively, adventurous daughter. Authorities at Cape Cod beaches put new safety measures in place in the weeks that followed. In order to track shark activity in real time, Drone patrols were implemented and lifeguards were outfitted with emergency trauma kits and tourniquets. Shark warning signs had been updated with more aggressive language advising swimmers to stay near shore and steer clear of deep waters. Though the measures provided some reassurance, the attack left a lingering unease among residents and visitors alike. Olivia's death was a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictability and the delicate balance between human recreation and wildlife preservation. A little plaque was placed close to Ballston Beach's entrance a few months later. Along with Olivia's name, it simply read, "In memory of Olivia Martinez, who loved the beauty of the ocean." For those who came to the shores of Cape Cod, it was a reminder and a tribute. Though the memory of that summer day hung over the town like a shadow, life eventually returned to normal for the locals. Discussions concerning seal populations and shark sightings continued. The tragic loss of Olivia Martinez was a devastating blow to her family, a young life taken by a brief moment of nature's wild ferocity. The incident was a stark reminder of the ocean's dual nature, its serene beauty and unforgiving power. With the knowledge that a world both fascinating and cruel lies beneath the waves, anyone who dared to enter its depths would do so with a deeper sense of caution. In the summer of 2009, the waters near Guadalupe Island, a remote volcanic island off the west coast of Mexico's Baja California peninsula, were as clear as glass. Known for its large population of great white sharks, the island had become a popular destination for divers eager to encounter these apex predators up close. In this surreal setting, Peter Hargrove, a seasoned diver with 20 years of open water experience, would have an unforgettable encounter. Marine life had long been drawn to Guadalupe Island, with its striking cliffs rising sharply from the Pacific Ocean. The island provided the perfect habitat for great white sharks, thanks to abundant prey and nutrient-rich currents. By 2009, shark cage diving had become a major attraction, drawing experts and thrill-seekers alike. These waters were familiar to Peter, who had scuba dived worldwide. He had made 2 previous trips to the island and had always held the sharks in the highest regard. Peter was part of a small dive team led by Captain Elias Trujillo, a seasoned sailor whose face bore the marks of decades spent on the ocean. The crew also included deckhand Mateo Larios and marine videographer Clara Delacroix. The previous days had been spent observing sharks from the safety of steel cages lowered into the water. On the trip's 4th day, however, Peter decided to take things a step further and free dive. It was a controversial choice, but free diving with great whites was not unheard of. While most great white sharks tended to avoid humans, there was always a risk that a territorial or curious shark could approach too closely, leaving divers exposed without the protection of a cage. Peter was confident in his abilities, having done a lot of research on shark behavior. He recognized how crucial it was to keep eye contact and refrain from making abrupt movements. What transpired next would contradict all of his presumptions. The vast blue engulfed Peter's body as he plunged into the cool water. While Mateo watched for any indications of questionable shark activity, Clara stayed on the boat and shot footage from above. The dive appeared uneventful at first. As he calmly floated, Peter watched schools of yellow-tailed tuna dart around him. It was misleading to claim that everything was peaceful. Out of the corner of his eye, Peter saw a shadow rise from the depths, a form so big that it seemed to overshadow the size of its surroundings. The great white shark was easily more than 18 feet long and had a girth that indicated it was a mature female. Its tail cut through the water with silent power as it moved purposefully. Knowing that panic would only attract the shark's attention, Peter forced himself to stay still, despite his racing heart. With terrifying speed, the shark drew closer, its black eyes fixed on him. As its massive body passed only a few feet away, it began to circle him. It felt like an eternity between each pass. Its pale underbelly bore scars that Peter could see were from battles fought deep within. Although he made an effort to regulate his breathing, waves of adrenaline shot through his body as he realized how exposed he was. Clara and Mateo, their faces white, watched silently from the surface. Even as Clara's camera whirred to record the encounter, she could feel the gravity of the situation. With his hands on the boat's side, Mateo prepared to pull out a safety line in case something went wrong. Peter and the shark, meanwhile, were engaged in a silent battle. On its third attempt, it leaned in closer, seemingly to examine him. He could see that its enormous jaw was lined with rows of sharp teeth. For a horrifying moment, the shark opened its mouth slightly, revealing the hollow void within. Peter's instincts screamed at him to flee, but he knew better. Doing so would trigger the shark's predatory nature. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shark lost interest. It turned gracefully, its massive body fading into the blue as if it had been a ghost all along. Peter exhaled, and the sound of his breath was loud in his ears. He signaled to the surface, and within moments, Matteo lowered a line for him to grab. When Peter finally broke the surface, Clara and Matteo hauled him aboard. His face was pale, his hands trembling, but he was unharmed. Captain Elias, who had been watching from the bridge, gave a brief nod, his way of acknowledging Peter's narrow escape. Back on the boat, Peter sat silently for a long time, replaying the encounter in his mind. The team reviewed Clara's footage, vividly capturing the shark's imposing presence. Clara, her voice steady but tinged with awe, remarked that the shark had been curious, not hunting. Peter agreed, but he knew how easily the situation could have changed. The encounter was a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictability and the respect its creatures demanded. The team cut the trip short, feeling they had pushed their luck far enough. For Peter, the experience was life-changing. He returned home to Portland, Oregon with a newfound appreciation for the delicate balance between humans and nature. He began giving talks to diving communities, emphasizing the importance of preparation, respect, and humility when entering the domain of apex predators. Clara's footage became a viral sensation, sparking debates about the ethics of free diving with sharks. While some criticized Peter's decision to dive without a cage, others praised his composure and the insight his story provided. In the following years, Peter continued to dive, but never again without a cage. The memory of the great white's unblinking gaze stayed with him, a reminder that humans were merely visitors in the ocean's vastness. New Zealand's South Island coastline is renowned for its rugged beauty and pristine waters. Near the town, the beaches attract surfers worldwide, eager to ride the powerful swells. However, this remote stretch of ocean is also home to one of nature's apex predators, the great white shark. On a cool October morning in 2024, Sophie Lee, a 26-year-old local surf enthusiast, had a chilling encounter she would never forget. Sophie had grown up in Kaikoura, a maritime culture town famous for its marine wildlife and a hotspot for whale watching and scuba diving. But Sophie had always felt most at home on a surfboard. That morning, the conditions were perfect. The sun shone golden on the water and the waves rolled in clean sets. Sophie joined a handful of surfers already in the water, eager to seize the day. After catching a few exhilarating waves, Sophie paddled out to line up for the next set. She noticed something odd as she rested on her board, scanning the horizon for the next swell. A dark shadow moved beneath her just a few meters away. At first, she dismissed it as a dolphin, common companions in these waters. But as the shadow circled back, her stomach tightened. The size and shape were unmistakable. It was a great white shark. Sophie's heart pounded, but years of surfing had taught her the importance of remaining calm in dangerous situations. Thrashing or panicking could provoke the shark. She paddled slowly toward the shore, trying to appear non-threatening. Her movements were deliberate, each stroke calculated to close the distance between herself and safety. The shark, however, was not easily deterred. It followed her, its dorsal fin breaking the surface behind her board. The other surfers had started to notice the commotion. Among them was a visiting Australian named Lucas Stroud, a seasoned surfer with a sharp eye for trouble. Lucas saw the shark trailing Sophie from his vantage point and immediately began paddling toward her. As Sophie neared the shallows, the shark's behavior shifted. It moved faster, circling closer to her board. Sophie could see its pale underbelly and the rows of jagged teeth. The predator seemed to sense that its window of opportunity was closing. Sophie's mind raced as she tried to maintain her composure, knowing that a single mistake could be disastrous. Then it happened. With a sudden burst of speed, the shark lunged. Sophie felt a rush of water as the massive creature surged upward, narrowly missing her board. The force of the lunge sent her teetering, but miraculously still upright. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as she paddled with every ounce of strength she had left. The shore was only a few meters away now, but the shark wasn't giving up. Lucas arrived just in time. Positioning himself between Sophie and the shark, he began splashing the water with his board, creating enough disturbance to confuse the predator. This brief distraction gave Sophie the final seconds to reach the shallows. The shark hesitated, seemingly deterred by the unfamiliar chaos and the shallowing water. Moments later, it disappeared into the depths, leaving a trail of fear and relief. On the beach, Sophie collapsed onto the sand, gasping for air. Her fellow surfers gathered around, their faces pale but relieved that she was unharmed. Lucas, visibly shaken but composed, joined the group and ensured Sophie was okay. The close call left everyone in awe of the ocean's raw power and the fragility of their presence in its domain. In the weeks that followed, Sophie became something of a local celebrity. News of her harrowing escape spread quickly, and she was inundated with interviews and questions. Despite the trauma of the encounter, Sophie chose to approach the experience with gratitude and a newfound respect for the ocean's inhabitants. She shared her story to increase awareness of the value of preserving sharks and their ecosystems, while working closely with marine conservation organizations. Sophie's experience also prompted changes within the Kaikoura surfing community. The local government implemented additional safety measures such as shark spotting patrols and awareness campaigns for swimmers and surfers. Sophie went back into the water, but this time she was more cautious. She still surfed the waves she grew up on because of her unwavering love for the ocean. Lucas became Sophie's close friend and supporter of her conservation initiatives. They promoted harmony with marine life by prioritizing education over fear. Far beyond Kaikoura, their message struck a chord as a reminder of the precarious equilibrium between nature and humanity. For Sophie, the memory of that October morning would always be vivid, a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictable nature. But it was also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the bonds formed in the face of danger. In 2013, 28-year-old adventure seeker Jacob Stone set out on what he hoped would be a once-in-a-lifetime kayaking trip off the coast of Gansbaai, South Africa. Known as the Great White Shark Capital of the world, Gansbaai is a small town on the southern coast, drawing thrill-seekers and marine life enthusiasts with its rocky beaches and turquoise waters. The area's proximity to Dyer Island, a major seal breeding ground, made it a prime location for great white shark sightings, attracting both locals and visitors. While traveling from Christchurch, New Zealand, Jacob had always been drawn to the sea. His way of unwinding was to paddle through open water, far from the noise of modern life. But on this particular day, his sought peace would quickly become a terrifying fight for survival. The morning was calm, with barely a ripple disturbing the water's glassy surface. Jacob launched his bright yellow kayak from a quiet stretch of beach just outside Gansbaai, paddling steadily toward the horizon. The only sounds were the rhythmic splash of his paddle and the occasional cries of seagulls circling overhead. He had no intention of venturing too far, but wanted to experience the coastline from a vantage point few others dared to explore. After almost an hour, Jacob noticed the stillness around him. The usual signs of marine activity, dolphins playing in the distance or seals bobbing in the waves, were absent. It was eerily quiet, a detail he would later recall with chilling clarity. Before he could dwell on it further, an abrupt and violent jolt shattered the calm. Jacob's kayak lurched sideways, nearly capsizing. His paddle slipped from his hands and dropped onto the water's surface. Dazed, he turned to see what had caused the impact. Rising out of the water, its unmistakable dorsal fin slicing through the surface, was a great white shark, about 5 meters long. It had bitten into the side of Jacob's kayak, its powerful jaws cracking the lightweight plastic. Thrown into the water, Jacob found himself face to face with the apex predator. Panic surged through him, but instinct took over. He kicked and flailed, trying to keep the shark at bay long enough to think of an escape plan. The kayak, now partially submerged, was still within reach. Jacob grabbed it and used it as a shield, pushing it between himself and the shark. The shark circled back, unfazed. When it swam closer, Jacob's eyes met its icy dark gaze. It moved purposefully, getting closer with each pass. Halfway back onto the battered kayak, Jacob climbed. Every muscle in his body was screaming with effort. Blood seeped from a deep gash on his forearm, a souvenir from the initial attack, and he knew the scent could escalate the situation further. Jacob looked frantically for assistance on the horizon. He noticed a small fishing boat with its crew pulling nets in the distance. He screamed for assistance and waved his voice, barely audible over the waves, using all of his remaining strength. The fisherman eventually noticed the disturbance after being oblivious to Jacob's predicament. As this happened, the shark lunged again, its powerful jaws snagging the kayak. The impact knocked Jacob unconscious, sending him back into the water. While the shark circled beneath him, Jacob could feel the rush of water around him. Time seemed to stretch on as he braced for the worst. Realizing the urgency, the fishermen sped their boat toward him. Thabo Maseko, a muscular man, was among them, and quickly threw a rope into the water. Jacob grabbed the lifeline, clinging to it with what little strength he had left. After Thabo and his team dragged him on board, the shark made one last pointless dive beneath the boat before disappearing into the ocean. Jacob fell onto the deck unhurt but safe. The crew promptly attended to his wound to stop the bleeding and covered his arm with a makeshift bandage. Reliving the events in his mind as the boat raced back to shore, Jacob found it difficult to believe how close he had come to becoming the shark's victim. The encounter garnered media attention and sparked contentious discussions regarding human and marine predator coexistence. While some argued for the significance of comprehending and preserving sharks, others criticized the rising popularity of extreme tourism in shark-inhabited waters. The encounter made a deep impression on Jacob, although his arm's physical scars served as a continual reminder of that day. The psychological effects were more profound. He refused to see the shark as a bad guy despite the trauma. After all, it was responding instinctively in its natural environment. Jacob supported ethical ocean exploration, prioritizing knowledge and deference over fear. He raised awareness of sharks' critical role in marine ecosystems and encouraged safer practices for water sports enthusiasts by collaborating with local conservation organizations in Gansbai. Jacob never returned to kayaking but discovered other ways to maintain his connection to the ocean. His tale served as a reminder of the fine line that separates wonder from peril in the most lucid state of nature.